For people have stood in front of that door at the bottom of Silo 18. Only one of them is still walking around able to talk about it, and even he spent months underground pretending he wasn't. For a year and a half, this fandom has treated that door scene as an unsolved case. The theory goes like this. The show cut away right before the real secret got said out loud, and everything since has been the writers dodging a question they already answered off camera. I used to think that theory had legs. Then Season 3 started answering the exact questions the door scene raised, on screen, in full, and it turns out the door was never hiding information from us. It was hiding a filing system. Today I want to walk through what that door actually said, what 4 different people did with it, and how the new season just handed us the missing half of the equation nobody thought we'd get this soon. Quick scope note before we start. This covers everything through Season 3, Episode 7, which is where the story stands as of this recording, with the finale still a couple weeks out. So there's still runway for something in this video to age badly. I'll flag the guesses as guesses that here's the shape of the mystery. Fast, for anyone catching up. Silo 18 is one of roughly 50 underground bunkers, built after some unspecified catastrophe wiped out the surface. Nobody inside is supposed to know that. The official story is that there's one silo, one humanity, and the world outside is poison. Lukas, a systems analyst turned reluctant heir to the head of IT, spends most of Season 2 decoding a letter left behind by a man named Salvador Quinn, decades dead, who used to run this silo. The letter leads him to a hidden tunnel at the very bottom of the structure, and at that tunnel, a voice. That voice calls itself the algorithm. And the fandom's big question was always, what did it actually tell him? Before we get into what was said, look at the guest list, because the guest list is doing more work than the transcript. The algorithm tells Lukas that exactly 3 people before him ever reached that door. Quinn, a woman named Mary Meadows, who ran up to be head of judicial, and a mechanic named George Wilkins, who found the tunnel on his own decades earlier and got nothing for it. No conversation, no warning. The algorithm straight up tells Lukas it never spoke to Wilkins at all. Sit with that for a second, because it's the detail everyone skips past on the way to the juicier stuff. A genuine secret gets protected from everyone, and hardest from the outsider who stumbled onto it by accident. This one does the opposite. It's handed on purpose to whoever is sitting at the top of the silo or being groomed to sit there next. And it's withheld from the guy who actually went looking. That's not security. That's succession planning. Whatever is behind that door isn't protecting a secret from the population. It's briefing management. So what's the briefing? Strip the scene down, and it's short. The voice confirms there are other silos. It confirms a mechanism called the safeguard exists, one capable of ending an entire silo's population without warning. And it delivers one instruction: never repeat any of this to anyone, or the safeguard gets triggered. That's it. No second file. No hidden appendix waiting behind a jump cut. The whole theory that something extra got edited out doesn't actually survive a close read of the dialogue because the sentence structure doesn't leave room for it. The voice announces the rule and states the rule in the same breath. There's no seam to hide a second message in, which leaves the actual interesting question sitting right there in plain sight. If 3 people got handed the identical 4 sentences, why did they turn into 3 completely different human beings? Salvador Quinn ran this silo through a stretch where it kept nearly tearing itself apart, roughly once a generation, each uprising feeding the memory of the last one. Season 3 finally lets Bernard say out loud what Quinn did about it. Facing a rebellion that was about to trip the safeguard and kill every single person in the silo, Quinn chose the version of the disaster he could survive. He drugged the entire population into forgetting their own history. Bernard puts a number on it. Roughly 2,000 people died from the terror and disorientation of that forced forgetting, a number Quinn apparently calculated himself in advance and carried out anyway. And then, having erased an entire population's memory to save the rest of them, he sat down and wrote a coded letter pointing straight back at the door he wasn't supposed to talk about. He encrypted it against the pact, the rulebook he personally helped write, the one document that governs every rule in that silo, so that only somebody holding the same book with the same authority he had could ever crack it. That's not a whistleblower move. That's a man leaving a key exactly where only his own successor would find it. Read the gag order and Quinn's actions side by side, and they line up perfectly. He never says a word to a living person in his own timeline. He just makes absolutely sure the next head of IT eventually gets the same phone call he did. Mary Meadows was next in line to run the silo. She found Quinn's letter, cracked it using her own copy of the pact, and then vanished for 4 days. When she came back, she quit the job that would have made her head of IT and took a role in judicial instead, a position with a big title and almost no actual power. She told the man she loved that she was leaving because she didn't want to be tied to him for life. Decades later, dying, she admitted that reason was a lie. For 25 years, she said nothing. She also spent those 25 years quietly collecting banned relics from before the silos, in a room she alone controlled, while personally functioning as the judge who was supposed to confiscate and destroy exactly that kind of contraband. She had the means to burn Quinn's letter and end the whole chain right there. She kept it instead. Season 3 gives that restraint a payoff. It's Meadows' hidden stash and her decades of quiet groundwork that end up handing Bernard, and eventually Juliet, the pieces they need. She never broke the rule. She just made sure the next person could. Lukas is the outlier, and this is where the theory the fandom built stops matching the character in front of us. He gets the same 4 sentences at the bottom of the silo, and he breaks within hours, mid-firefight, telling Bernard everything and naming Meadows' silence as proof he understands exactly what he's risking. Bernard, who has run this silo for decades on the strength of that same rule and never once gone near the door himself, hears it secondhand and simply stops, hands over his authority, walks toward the outside to look at it before he expects to die. For people, one directive for completely different outcomes. And here's the piece I think the earlier theory got backwards. The instinct was to assume a bigger secret must explain the bigger reactions. But you don't need a bigger secret. You need to remember that a gag order about a machine that can gas 10,000 people isn't the same weight of information to an administrator who's already made peace with hard math, a woman who wanted out of the system entirely, and a younger man who was never built to sit quietly on anything. Same words, different people standing under them. The variable was never the content of the message. It was who received it. That here's the part the earlier round of theorizing simply didn't have access to, because it hadn't aired yet. Season 3 opens with Lukas alive, Bernard supposedly dead, and Juliet back inside Silo 18 with her memory chemically scrubbed. All of it, we later learn, ordered by the algorithm itself as damage control. Robert Sims tells Juliet that Bernard died in the airlock fire. That's a lie. Bernard survived, badly burned, and Sims later smothers him to keep him quiet, only for Juliet to find him hidden alive weeks later, deep beneath the silo. Camille, Sims's wife, steps into the role of the algorithm's newest handler, which means the show now has a second person in Meadows and Quinn's old chair, getting fed instructions by the same voice, in real time, and we get to watch the decision-making instead of reconstructing it after the fact. And the safeguard itself finally stops being an abstract threat. It's a literal pipe on level 14, engineered to flood a silo's air with poison the moment the algorithm decides the population has gone too far. Juliet and a survivor named Solo find the equivalent pipe, capped, in the ruins of the neighboring Silo 17, which is the reason that Silo has 10,000 corpses instead of a functioning population. Someone up there did try to stop it, once, and paid for it. Season 3 also raises the stakes past a single silo's borders. Contact between 2 silos isn't just against the rules. It's treated as grounds to end both of them, which recasts every scene of Lukas digging sideways through the mines towards Silo 17 as a much bigger gamble than it looked like in Season 2. None of that walks back the gag order reading. If anything, it reinforces it. Every fact Season 3 has confirmed about the safeguard is a fact the door scene already implied back in Season 2. What's changed is that we're no longer inferring the mechanism from behavior. We're watching it operate in real time, on a second generation of people making the same impossible calculations Quinn and Meadows made in private. There's one loose thread from that original door scene that Season 3 still hasn't fully closed, and it's worth flagging because it's the one place I'll admit the mystery is genuinely still open. When the voice threatens Lukas, it doesn't say I. It says we. We will have no choice. Season 3 has given the voice a name, the algorithm, and shown it managing a silo's population in granular, almost bureaucratic detail, deciding who gets extra medication, who gets fed a cover story, who gets quietly erased from the record. But it still hasn't told us, plainly, whether that we means a genuinely networked system talking to other silos, a committee of humans somewhere feeding it instructions, or a single machine that learned to talk about itself like a group because a group is scarier than a program. Every one of those answers changes what kind of story this actually is. A network turns this into a story about an institution. A committee turns it into a story about people hiding behind a machine's voice. A single system performing plurality turns it into something closer to a ghost story with better engineering. My honest read, going into the finale. The show has spent 3 seasons building toward the idea that whatever runs this network was built by people who are long dead, and what's left is closer to a very well-maintained inheritance than a living decision-maker. But that's a prediction, not a confirmed reading, and I'd rather tell you that plainly than dress it up as more certain than it is. Strip away the theory crafting, and what's actually on screen is a study of 4 responses to the exact same piece of information. An administrator who chose calculated loss over total loss and then quietly made sure the truth would outlive him. A woman who couldn't stomach staying inside the system and spent a quarter-century holding a door open for someone else to walk through. A man too young and too angry to sit on anything, who broke the rule within hours and then spent the rest of the season testing exactly how far he could push before the machine noticed. And a lifelong loyalist who heard the whole thing secondhand and simply stopped believing in the job he'd built his entire identity around. That's not a story with a hidden ending bolted onto it. That's a complete one, sitting right there in 4K studies. The show has been quietly running since the very first season. If the finale in September gives us a clean answer on that, I'll be back to eat whatever needs eating. Until then, that's my read. Let me know where you land in the comments, especially on the plural, because I've gone back and forth on it more times than I want to admit. And if you want to be here the day that door finally gets a straight answer, subscribing costs nothing and helps more than you'd think.